Hey everyone, I'm Allison Mars. You are watching NBC News Now. Here's what's happening. Surrender. The South Carolina lawyer accused of plotting his own death turns himself in. We will have the latest on this bizarre saga.
Choice is this. Are we going to continue with an economy where the overwhelming share of the benefits go to big corporations and the very wealthy? Or are we going to take this moment right now to set this country on a new path?
Giving the middle class a fair shot. The new tax plan President Biden says will make the wealthy pay their fare.
Tequila is like my life's work. So I started obsessing about the idea of becoming an entrepreneur.
She's building an empire one sip at a time. We'll introduce you to Mexico's first female master of tequila. We start today with Alex Murdaugh turning himself in, the South Carolina attorney, in front of a judge right now over a bizarre plot to arrange his own death for insurance money. NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalas here to break down this case. But first, NBC News correspondent Katie Beck has more on Mordoch's surrender and the latest developments in this case.
We are told that attorneys will argue that Mordoch should be allowed to return to his rehab facility, whereas he is being treated for an opioid addiction. Now, all of this is happening at the same time that we are learning a new development in this case, that SLED has opened a death investigation into the 2018 death of the Mordoch family housekeeper, Gloria Satterfield. There has been reports that there was actually never an autopsy done at the time of her death, and that her death certificate actually cited natural causes as the cause of death, which we are told is inconsistent with cause when there is an injury or a fall, which they said happened in that case. We are going to be continuing to follow the very latest developments in the Mordoch case and have them for you ahead.
All right, let's bring in NBC legal analyst Danny Savalas. Danny, this story is just something else. Let's talk about first Mordoch's bond hearing, which is happening right now. He's charged with insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, and filing a false police report. What will the judge consider here when setting his bond?
I'm surprised that's all he's charged with right now. I wouldn't be surprised if they come up with additional charges moving forward. But a judge here, like every judge with every defendant, is considering really two primary things. What is the likelihood that this defendant will flee? And what is the likelihood that he poses a danger to the community? So that's the consideration. In a high-profile case like this, there's always a concern that this is a defendant who's sophisticated, who would be able to abscond. But then, of course, as a defense attorney, you argue, look, he's got ties to the community. His family has held the position of solicitor, I think, for 80 years. So, I mean, there's arguments on both sides. One side may say, look, he's got more means than your normal criminal to escape. He's going to argue that I have no money, I'm in poverty. It's a pretty standard process. And ultimately, a lot of these bond hearings are really arbitrary numbers when it comes to releasing them.
Danny Savalas with the vocab word of the day, abscond. I gotta love it. One of Mordoch's attorneys not disputing that his client was involved in this suicide for hire plot, but giving some context. Listen to him on the Today Show yesterday.
He believed that $10 million policy had a suicide exclusion. Suicide exclusions are only good for 2 years, and he didn't realize that. So he arranged to have this guy shoot him. He was in a dark, dark, dark place and wanted to help his son in any way he could, the remaining son, Buster, in any way he could, and he thought this was the only way he could leave him with anything.
Danny, you're a defense attorney. How would you defend Mordoch here?
In this case, it seems that Mordoch may have already made confessions or admissions that pretty much establish his involvement in this insurance fraud allegation. Of course, we don't know yet for sure. It's all alleged right now. But if he's already made those confessions, then this might be a pretty good strategy by his defense counsel to say, look, he's in a dark place. You folks, imagine how dark a place you'd have to be to think that your life is only worth what the insurance policy would pay out to your surviving son. I mean, he's really working the sympathy angle, and he's got a point. I mean, this is not a decision that people make outside of movies. You know, you see this kind of plot in a movie, but you don't really see it that much in real life.
Danny, authorities are now opening a criminal investigation into the death of the Mordoch family's housekeeper, Gloria Satterfield. She died 3 years ago in what was described as a trip and fall. Her family releasing a statement saying this news, quote, causes more questions at a time when the family just wanted answers. In addition to that investigation, Mordoch's wife and son were killed in June. Their deaths still not solved. How will these two separate investigations play into his case?
They'll play in that I really want to see what happens here, because I think, like you, folks have been wondering what the heck is going on in South Carolina with these murders, and they're still unsolved. I mean, there are a lot of unanswered questions. Was there some connection to this most recent allegation, or are they just completely independent, tragic moments that really have nothing to do with each other? But I think a lot of folks want answers, including us. So we're going to be watching that very closely to see what authorities come up with.
It's going to be some case, some trial to watch here. Danny, thank you so much for helping to walk us through it. New police body cam footage out today of an emotional Gabby Petitto after an alleged fight with her fiancé, Brian Laundrie, while police hope to talk with him. Moab City Police in Utah say they were called to break up an argument between Petito and Laundrie on August 12th. That was just weeks before Petito's parents reported her missing. Here's body cam video of Petito talking to the officers.
What's going on? How come you're crying?
I'm just crying. We've just been fighting this morning. Some personal issues.
It was a long day. We were camping yesterday, and camping got stopped.
NBC News Now correspondent Dasha Burns has more on the search for the missing 22-year-old.
We are right outside Capitol Reef right now.
New revelations in the mysterious disappearance of 22-year-old Gabrielle Petito, who went missing in the middle of a road trip with her fiancé, Brian Laundrie.
Brian's stretching, doing some morning yoga.
Authorities now name Laundrie as a person of interest in the case, but according to officials, he's refusing to cooperate with the investigation.
I think we're just pleading with him at this point to please speak with us. We need to understand those details.
Authorities say Laundrie returned to his hometown of Northport, Florida, south of Tampa, on September 1st, 10 days before Petito's family reported her missing.
You've seen these sorts of cases before. What do these sorts of actions say?
Well, I think we can all come to a conclusion, right? But of what that appears to look like. It doesn't appear to look good for him by any means.
Laundrie drove home with the van the two used for their travels, but without Petito.
I don't know that there's anything that we've experienced to this level of not only just the strangeness around, somebody just driving back home, parking that car in the driveway, and then not speaking to us about where the quote-unquote love of their life is.
Police releasing new photos of the van and setting up a hotline with the FBI. Adding to the mystery, today the Moab City Police Department in Utah releasing an incident report from August 12th. In it, striking details from officers responding to a possible domestic incident involving Laundrie and Petito. Witnesses reportedly seeing the two arguing outside their van, Laundrie telling an officer they had been arguing more than usual. The officer at the scene saying at no point in my investigation did Gabrielle stop crying, but also saying they did not believe the situation escalated to domestic assault as much as a mental health crisis. Officials ultimately separating the two, Brian agreeing to be taken to a hotel by the officer that night.
So me and Brian just got up and got ready, made the bed in the tent.
The two had been meticulously documenting their van life journey on social media, setting off on July 2nd. She stopped communicating with her family on August 30th. She was last believed to be in Grand Teton National Park.
We love her very much. We miss her and we want her to come home.
Authorities saying the key to bringing her daughter home may be Brian's cooperation.
If you could speak to Brian directly right now, what would you say to him?
Just come talk with us. I mean, this can change at any minute. Anytime he wants to come speak to the Northport Police Department, we're ready to go because there will probably come a time where we take actions based on the fact of him potentially hindering an investigation. So I think it's in his best interest to let us know what he knows.
Brian Laundrie's attorney issuing a statement saying, in part, in my experience, intimate partners are often the first person law enforcement focuses their attention on in cases like this. And the warning that any statement may well be used against you is true, regardless of whether my client had anything to do with Ms. Petitto's disappearance. As such, on the advice of counsel, Mr. Laundrie is not speaking on the matter. Leveling the playing field in our economy. President Biden out with new plans to help the middle class today. NBCNews.com senior White House reporter Shannon Petitto joining me now. Shannon, President Biden's proposal built around raising taxes on the wealthiest Americans. How is he going to make them pay up, and how will the administration use that money to help the middle class?
Well, this is all part of this really big $3.5 trillion spending bill the president has been talking about for months now, and actually talking about since the campaign trail. He is trying to frame this today as something that is going to be for working class, middle class people, and that will be paid for by not only increasing taxes, but getting better enforcing, I should say, taxes on the wealthiest and corporations, while at the same time giving some tax breaks to middle and class people. So he talked about tax credits that could be in this plan, sort of like a child tax credit. He talked about how this plan would lower the cost of prescription drugs, would help families pay for childcare, would help pay for higher education, and would add and create jobs. Now, of course, this messaging is not just to middle class viewers out there, but it is also to Congress. This plan faces a very rocky road ahead, not only getting support from any Republicans, but just getting Democrats to unite behind it. So that's part of the reason we're seeing this messaging and this sales pitch from the president today.
Shannon, the president counting on Congress to pass those infrastructure bills to make this happen. Neither one of them heading to his desk just yet. So what is the plan if Congress can't come through?
Well, I mean, that's a great question, because the plan really until this point has been, if we can't get Republican support, we'll just do it with Democrats. We'll get this through Democrats alone. Well, that isn't looking like a sure deal either. You've got Senators Manchin and Sinema raising questions about the price tag. You've got progressives who want to see the president go bolder. So there's a lot of division among Democrats right now. They may be able to meet in the middle somewhere, and that still is an option to find something that Democrats can agree on and try and get that through by the end of the year.
Shannon, we got to talk about Nicki Minaj. She's insisting she was invited to the White House to talk about vaccine safety. The White House, though, saying they just offered her a phone call. Here's Minaj on her Instagram last night.
Do y'all think that I would go on the internet and lie about being invited to the White House? Like, what? You know what the request was? We'd like to offer Nicki an invitation to come to the White House to speak with two people, the two names, what is that man's name? Dr. Fauci, and with the Surgeon General.
So, Shannon, let's get to the bottom of this. What is the latest from the White House on this today? Was Nicki invited? Was she not?
Well, I don't know if I can get to the bottom of this one. That's going to take some more investigative reporting on my part, Allison. But I can tell you what Press Secretary Jen Psaki had to say today. She said that Nicki was offered a phone call, that it was between at the staff level where White House staff communicated with her staff, offering her a phone call to talk to a doctor. And Psaki didn't specify who that doctor would be. But she also framed this as something that the White House routinely does for people who have big followings, celebrities, social media influencers who have questions and want to talk about the vaccine and have concerns. So this was not something out of the ordinary that the White House did, but it was also, from the White House's perspective, only framed as a phone call, not an in-person invitation at this point.
Shannon, I know you will stay on top of this one and get to the bottom of it. We very much appreciate you.
Thank you.
It's back up. Crews working overnight to reinstall fencing around the Capitol building ahead of Saturday's Justice for J6 rally. But will they even need it? NBC News senior reporter Ben Collins here now to tell us why extremist groups are steering their followers away from the demonstration. And NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Leanne Caldwell has the latest on security for this Saturday. Leanne, we'll start with you. DHS expecting about 700 protesters to show up. Besides the fencing, what else are police doing to gear up for Saturday, whatever the crowd size may be?
Yeah, Allison, regardless of if it's going to be a huge rally or not, Capitol Police are taking no chances, and they are preparing as if it's going to be something similar to what happened on January 6th. And they are doing everything that they did not do on January 6th, including increase their communication, not only with their rank and file officers and among leadership, but among leadership congressional offices of both parties. They are also putting up this fencing around the Capitol, something that didn't exist until after January 6th as a reactionary method. Now they're using it as a way to keep people out. This is around the perimeter of the Capitol so that traffic, for the time being, is still able to drive. They've also put up security cameras as well. I'm told from a Capitol Police officer that these are facial recognition cameras and actually came from Afghanistan, some of the few equipment that was sent from that country back to the United States. And so they are doing everything they can in order to ensure what happened on January 6th does not happen. This could be over preparation, but they would rather over prepare than be blindsided, Allison.
Yeah, Leanne, I don't think anyone's going to complain if they're over-prepared. Ben, in your latest reporting for NBC News, you write that paranoia and accusations are clouding efforts to launch this Justice for January 6th rally, and that users in extreme far-right Facebook groups and extremist forums are largely steering users away from an upcoming rally. Why?
Well, they think it's a trap. They think it's a trap from the FBI to coerce more Trump supporters to do violence and then bring those people in. They think it's what's known as a honeypot in their space, basically a way to target people who are either there on the 6th or bring more people into the extremist space so they can personally arrest them. Now, there's no evidence of this whatsoever, obviously, but that is something that they believe. And look, it's also not really the MO of what the Proud Boys and these extremist groups have been up to in the past 8 months. They've been hyper-focused on these very small local rallies and fights, frankly, in the Pacific Northwest and places like Los Angeles, anti-mask rallies, anti-vaccine rallies, anti-trans rallies. That's where their focus has been in the last few months. This would be a little bit out of character.
So, Ben, what are the rally organizers doing to try to encourage people to show up, given all of this growing paranoia?
Well, initially they fought back against the idea that this was some sort of false flag or, that this was a honeypot. They said this, don't fall into this trap. And they said that it was pushed by the far right, far left, pushed by people who do not want you to attend. However, now they're saying lean into it, basically, they're saying, I'm sure there will be feds, but you're going to show up anyway. And in fact, there are some people on these extremist message boards who are saying, if you are going to show up, make sure you do violence while you're there. So that's the sort of rhetoric you're hearing around this. I think that's why, people are so afraid about this, is if people do show up, they're throwing caution to the wind a little bit here.
Leanne, Capitol Police briefed lawmakers on security earlier this week. As you've said, they appear to be over-prepared. They say they are ready. We know that lawmakers won't be around this weekend, but still, it's a big deal. How are they feeling ahead of Saturday? Are they confident in the Capitol Police force? Do they feel like the Capitol is secure as it needs to be?
They are confident in Capitol Police. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said at an event earlier today outside of Washington that she thinks that they are doing a fantastic job. She says they did a good job on January 6th, too, because they saved a lot of people's lives on that day. But she noted how prepared they are for September 18th in this Justice for J6 rally. And a Republican who has been extremely critical of the former president, extremely critical about the stances his party has taken about January 6th and the election that he says was in fact not rigged and not falsified, which is actually the truth. Adam Kinzinger said on MSNBC today that he is confident that the Capitol Police are prepared, but he's not so confident and that the rioters aren't going to show up. Let's listen.
Well, I'm pretty confident we won't see a repeat of occupying the Capitol. I'm not confident we won't see violence. I am confident that law enforcement is more prepared.
In addition, even though representatives from Congress and in the Senate are not going to be in town, Capitol Police have advised them to be in lots of communication with them because there are rallies, smaller rallies planned in cities around the country. And so the Capitol Police are increasing their footprint, saying communicate with us in case things get out of hand or if you see anything that we should know about. Allison.
Ben, January 6th was over 8 months ago. Could you tell us how, if it has, the dynamic shifted in some of these extremist forums since then? How different are they now?
Yeah, they are very afraid of being watched and surveilled by the federal government. That was not the case for the 6th. In the days before the 6th, they were posting, overt blueprints, plans for what to do in the next couple of days. They were posting pictures of their ammo. It was a completely different situation than it is now, and it's probably not going to happen again, part because these people thought they had the federal government on their side. They thought they had the former president on their side as well. They are clearly now at war with the government one-to-one. So they are going to be a lot more discreet the next time they try to pull off something like they did on January 6th.
All right, Ben Collins, Leanne Caldwell, thank you both. Let's go to NBC News Digital reporter Maya Eaglin. She has the latest headlines from NBCnews.com. Maya.
Hey, Allison, we start in California, where a lawsuit against Marilyn Manson has been dismissed. An ex-girlfriend accusing the singer of raping and physically abusing her throughout their relationship. Manson still faces sexual assault lawsuits from 3 other women. A representative for Manson has repeatedly denied all accusations of sexual assault. A search for a missing man in the Grand Canyon leads to the discovery of another man's remains. Crews have been searching for Hungarian national Gabby Tamansi, who was reportedly missing in July. But that search led them to what they believe is the body of Scott Walsh. They found prescriptions in his name and a New York driver's license. Walsh was last seen in the park in 2015, but was never reported missing. The county medical examiner will confirm the identity of the remains. Former NFL player Brandon Short's daughter has died. 26-year-old Carly Short was 5 months pregnant when she was shot in a town just outside of Pittsburgh. Brandon wrote on Facebook, quote, "My heart is broken. I've lost the light of my life. We found out it was just a little boy, so we lost 2. He played linebacker for Penn State before playing professionally for the New York Giants and Carolina Panthers. Misinformation causes tragedy in Kentucky, where bride-to-be Samantha Wendell died from COVID after choosing not to get vaccinated. Wendell and her fiancé were told by coworkers that vaccines could cause infertility, a claim that's not supported by any scientific evidence. Still, the couple decided they would hold off on getting their shots. Wendell passed away 5 days before she was supposed to get married. And the Toy Hall of Fame is looking to add a few more members. Some of the finalists include the classic Cabbage Patch Kids, Settlers of Catan, Battleship, and Garden Variety Sand. Finalists were chosen from thousands of nominations, but only 3 will be inducted. To be considered, toys must withstand the tests of time and foster learning and creativity. The winners will be welcomed into the hall on November 4th. Allison, those toys are quite memorable. I'm excited.
Thanks, Maya.
We've lost about 1,035 people as of today. 50% of those deaths are from our Latino community. So we've lost 518 people from our communities.
The Latino community makes up a third of the population in Travis County, Texas, but 50% of the COVID deaths there. They're also less likely to be vaccinated. I want to bring in NBC News correspondent Antonia Hilton. She's in Travis County's Pflugerville, which is just outside of Austin. Antonia, the vaccination rate for Latinos there is 11% below the state average. What are you hearing from folks there? Why are they hesitant to get the shot?
Well, Allison, the answers are in some cases all over the place, really. And I spoke to people all day long who were vaccine hesitant and were meeting with local community organizers who were trying to convince them to get their very first shots. What we heard throughout the day was, first, that there are people who've gotten misinformation from political and religious sources in the Latino community here in Austin that has made them nervous to get the vaccine, worried about the side effects or long-term effects. Then there are people who were worried about side effects, but not because of misinformation, but because because they work in food truck and food services industries, and they say they have bosses who they're not sure will give them paid time off if they have side effects and they can't show up to work. So one of the things that we saw organizers do here is actually try to talk to owners of different businesses and people who run some of these locations like the one I'm at right now, and get them to support their employees and make sure that they get that time in the event that they need it. And then there were people who were just worried about their own bodily autonomy, or who really needed someone to speak to them in Spanish, speak to them with language that's culturally competent about the questions that they had, to give them forms that were in Spanish so that they could actually understand what they were signing up for. And we saw all that play out. I want you to meet a man that we spoke to yesterday who got his first ever vaccine shot after meeting with the coalition that was on the ground here. Take a listen. Why do you think so many Latinos are still a little nervous about getting their shots?
¿Por qué piensan que muchos latinos todavía están nerviosos de no quieren tomar la
Primero, por la mala noticia que a veces uno recibe por otras personas que si viene a vacunarse va a tener otra enfermedad, pero la verdad no es así. Ese es el motivo, por eso la gente no quiere acudir.
Right before I met with him, we met other folks there who had similar stories but weren't comfortable coming on camera. Many of the people we met said that they actually decided to come and finally get the vaccine because they had family members who caught the Delta variant, or in some cases were in the hospital right now fighting for their lives, and they felt like now is the time they had to take action. Allison?
Antonio, you talked to officials who say there's a lot of misinformation in Latin communities. What are they doing to help get the right info out there and get more shots in arms?
Well, you know, what we're seeing on the ground here is there are public health and city officials, and then there are Latino community organizers like the Austin Latino Coalition. And when it comes to the public health messaging from the city, what we hear on the ground is that often it is missed by the Latino community. Even though they're putting out good information and they're hosting vaccination drives, it's not always in a language or in a way that it gets communicated properly to this community that has a lot of immigrants and some folks who can't read or speak in English. And so it's been left to people who aren't public health officials, who aren't doctors, to fill in the gap. And so what they do is they have really patient, individualized conversations. What I saw was people literally sitting down at tables together, answering questions, talking through, dispelling myths. And they, both sides agree, the activists and then the officials here in the city agree that it's that kind of community building and conversational work that is ultimately going to close the gap here and help the entire city of Austin get out of the woods. I want you to listen to a conversation that I had with a man named Frank Fuentes. He is a member of the coalition that I mentioned, and he's felt like, even though he works in construction and isn't an expert on the pandemic, that he and others have had to really step up and fill in that communication gap. Listen.
So there is disparities within our Latino community, our brown and black communities. And I think a lot of it has to do with the mistrust that they have within our local government, the mismanagement that they've done with the messaging. They've done some horrible messaging. Some of it has been even hurtful. So we've created our own messaging. We've done it ever since the beginning of COVID, because there was never any messaging to our community.
You know, what's also really important to know about Austin, Allison, is that although this is known as a liberal city in Texas, it's a deeply segregated city. On the west side, it's majority white and wealthier people. And on the east side, it is those brown and black communities that you just mentioned, that you just heard Frank mention right there. And on the east side, there's less healthcare infrastructure. There are fewer public health officials and friendly faces. People don't have as many relationships with quality providers. And so when this pandemic hit, the organizers here felt like people on the other side of the city needed to make an extra effort to reach out and to bring those resources over to the other side of the city. And in some cases, they feel like that didn't happen. But now they're boots on the ground. They are hosting more drives. And already this group has has given out 35,000 vaccines. And that's just them doing this boots on the ground work themselves. And they say they're going to do more in the coming weeks. Allison.
That's some progress. Antonio Hilton in Pflugerville, Texas. Thank you. The U.S. entering a new era. As the Hispanic population flourishes, the Latino landscape across the country is changing from big states to small towns. NBC News correspondent Gabe Gutierrez has more from New Hampshire.
It is New England postcard perfect, and in Nashua, New Hampshire, a new boom is underway. I think the American dream is constantly changing.
Oscar Velasquez is one of now more than 59,000 Latinos who live in this state. In the last decade, its total population grew by less than 5%, while the Hispanic population skyrocketed 62%. Oscar's mother was a factory worker, his dad a handyman, and for this Ecuadorian American, the journey has been a struggle.
Have you felt prejudice here?
Absolutely.
First generation. That's why last year, Oscar launched his own local radio show called First Gen American.
You should be speaking English.
After a woman was caught on video yelling at immigrants.
Do you consider this home?
I do, for the most part.
For the most part. Why not completely?
Because as we try so hard to fit in, we do an amazing job sticking out.
For years, Oscar has gotten his hair cut at a barber shop owned by Rafael Almonte from the Dominican Republic.
¿Por qué te has quedado aquí?
La renta es más cómoda, el trabajo.
New Hampshire isn't the only state luring Latinos because of jobs and affordable housing. North Dakota has seen a 148% jump. South Dakota, 75%. Vermont, Louisiana, and Tennessee are not far behind.
We come to this country with a dream, and after a while, you feel like you're part of this United States.
In 2010, New Hampshire was 94% white. 10 years later, that's dropped to 88%.
How has Nashua changed over the last 2 decades?
Well, we've become more inclusive, more diverse. I think we've become a richer community.
For Oscar Velasquez, that diversity means much more than just new restaurants, new faces, or even a new language. It's a new mentality.
Until we understand as a whole country and we're seen as Americans, I think that there's still a great opportunity that we can come together to solve a lot of these issues, and it starts right here within our community.
Our community, he says, not someone else's.
A Canadian in the coal mine, California Democrats sending a warning about Latino voters after Tuesday's recall election. Most California Latinos voted to keep Governor Gavin Newsom in office, but by a smaller margin than Democrats have won by in the past. NBC News senior digital politics reporter Alex Seitzwald joining me now. So, Alex, 60% of Latino voters opposed this recall, according to an NBC News exit poll. That's down from 64% of Latinos who voted for Newsom in the 2018 gubernatorial election. You spoke with the Democratic strategist. What's he saying about the drop in support?
Right. So that might not seem like a huge number, 4 percentage points, but it's the trend line that's concerning Democrats. Donald Trump won a historic number of Latinos in 2020 in places like South Florida and South Texas. And the big question was that a fluke, or was there something bigger going on? Was it just because we know Cubans in South Florida tend to be more Republican? Was it something about Trump? Was it the election in COVID? So this is our first real world test since 2020 in California. And there are some potentially troubling signs for Democrats. Mike Trujillo, this Los Angeles-based Democratic strategist that I spoke to, he called it a canary in the coal mine, which is that Hispanic voters, Latino voters in California basically looked like white voters much more than black voters or Asian American voters. They broke for and against the recall at about the same rate as white voters. The gender gap was about the same as white voters. And I think this just underscores that the Latino community is a lot more diverse than we often think about them. And those trends that we've been talking about, about working class voters moving away from Democrats, rural voters, religious voters moving away from Democrats, that's happening with Latinos too.
Alex, your story looks at Imperial County, California. It's the canary in the coal mine that we mentioned earlier. Why are Democrats so concerned about this county in particular?
Yeah, so Imperial is a good place to get a kind of a heartbeat or a pulse of the Latino community because it's the most Latino county in California. It's over 80% Latino, reliably blue. It's down in the southeast corner on the Mexican border. And what's really interesting, and these are actual votes, we should say. This is not exit polls. So even if you have some methodological issues with exit polls, we're looking at actual votes here. The recall did better in Imperial County than it did statewide. And there's been this erosion of support there. Hillary Clinton in 2016 got won by 41 points. Joe Biden, that dropped all the way down to about 25 points. And now the recall is more around 22 points. And it's this trend line that is concerning Democrats because they're seeing it now, not just in South Florida, not just in South Texas, but also in true blue California too.
So, Alex, what are the Democrats doing here? What's their strategy to try to win some of these Latino voters back for the midterms and beyond? Because you don't want to just fix it for next year but then have the problem surge back a short time after.
Right. Well, a lot of the Latino Democratic strategists that I spoke to, so the number one thing that candidates and the party has to do is recognize that there is no one Latino vote. There's lots of different types of Latino voters. And so you can't use this kind of one size fits all message that is often too common, where you translate your ad into Spanish, or you go talk to them about immigration, because you have small business owners who are Latinos. You have, people who drive pickup trucks and go to church every Sunday and live in rural communities who are Latinos. So there's a lot more diversity in this vote. And then the other thing that I'm told they need to do is just do a lot more outreach. That they, these are people who are not necessarily consuming the same media that white voters are. So you need to reach them where they are. That means a lot of field programs, going out, knocking doors, and meeting people where they are, instead of assuming that they're just this one monolithic voting bloc.
All right, Alex Seitzwald is a fascinating story, giving us a real deep dive into what's going on there. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Allison.
It is time for the bottom line, our daily look at what's going on in the business world and beyond. Two important numbers out today: retail sales and weekly jobless claims. We will start with the positive. August retail sales out this morning, better than expected, up 0.7% from July. Now, that doesn't sound like all that much, but economists actually thought we'd see a drop instead. Americans spending more money last month online and on things like furniture and home furnishings. The disappointment today, weekly jobless claims. They came in at 332,000. That's up 20,000 from the week before. Now, it looks like it may just be a temporary bump. Layoffs from Hurricane Ida were the issue here, but we need to see those claims keep dropping if we're going to get back to those pre-pandemic employment levels. She has been named one of the 50 most powerful women in Mexico and is the world's first female maestra tequilera, or master of tequila, shaping how the world sees her home country through its most famous spirit. I spent some time with Bertha Gonzalez Nieves at Casa restaurant in New York City to talk about her passion, the pandemic, and becoming a master in a man's world.
Cheers. Cheers. Feliz Día de la Independencia. Happy Independence Day, September 16.
And to you.
My name is Bertha Gonzalez Nieves, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Tequila Casa Dragones.
A small batch tequila brand with strong connections to Mexican Independence Day.
The name Casa Dragones, it also has the number 16. That is the address of our house, but it's also the date of Mexican independence, which is September 16.
Named after Los Dragones, a cavalry from San Miguel de Allende that launched Mexico's break from Spain.
The first conspirational meeting to plan the movement of Mexican independence was done in San Miguel de Allende by these two generals and their team. San Miguel de Allende, it's our spiritual home because a lot of the inspiration for our brand came there.
Much of that inspiration also from Gonzalez Nieves herself, the first female tequila master in the world.
This is my passion. Tequila is like my life's work. So I started obsessing about the idea of becoming an entrepreneur, and I went to a party in Brooklyn.
A chance meeting with Bob Pittman, the founder of MTV, and Casa Dragones was born.
We saw eye to eye that the opportunity in the category was really about showcasing that tequila has everything to be able to compete with other very established categories like single malts, like whiskeys, like cognacs. That's what we saw was the opportunity, to prove that, and to prove that the spirit really should be sipped and savored, should be admired by its craftsmanship and its quality.
Tell us about the very, very first tequila that you offered, the very first Casa Dragones. What was it? What about it was so unique?
We fell in love with this blend of white tequila with extra aged tequila that has been aged in New American white oak barrels. And we did this beautiful master blend. So you're getting the floral and the citrus notes of the Blanco tequila balanced with the sweetness and the spice of the extra aged tequila.
So in 2009, Casa Dragones Joven came to life. Every bottle made by hand.
We decided that we wanted to do an old-style decanter made modern to transmit the idea of sipping and to also showcasing, the meticulous attention to detail that we have in our liquid, in our packaging. So after that, doing our Joven for 5 years, we thought that the right next step for us was to bring a Blanco tequila that is focused on actually showcasing the purity of our agave and the purity of our water through an ultra-modern process.
In June of 2020, they introduced their third tequila, the Añejo Barrel Blend.
We wanted to showcase the tequila in a way that it could actually not only seduce the tequila lover, but also, you know, the whiskey lover.
They also jumped in to help their fellow restaurant and bar owners in the midst of the pandemic.
From doing the bartender exchange program to do grants for bartenders across Mexico and the U.S., to really partner on doing cocktails to go, you know, providing our partners with bottles so that then they can actually use that as a vessel to sell the spirits, to partnering with the USBG, with the James Beard Foundation. We made a donation from out of our sales from Reserve Bar to go to the James Beard Foundation for the Open for Good campaign, and really just trying to, within our means, you know, try to be supportive.
What a difficult thing to do, though, to be that nimble as a small batch producer.
It's really more about how you collaborate with each other that really connects with the consumer and brings life to the category. So I think that we keep that very close to our heart, and we take it very seriously.
For a young person who's watching this today thinking, wow, she's living her dream, what would you say to that person about starting something of their own, being the first female master of tequila?
I wish for all those young women out there that they have the opportunity to find a subject, an industry, or a service that enables them to truly go on a journey to discover their potential, because I think that is what the real reward is all about. Dedicate yourself. Don't take anything for granted. There's no door that you can't open.
Cheers.
Cheers.
This investigation concluded that the Aurora Police Department and Aurora Fire and Rescue have a pattern and practice of violating rights secured by state and federal law.
A scathing report about the Aurora Police Department in Colorado showing a pattern of racially biased policing. That report, the result of a year-long investigation prompted by the death of 23-year-old Elijah McClain. Police put McClain in a chokehold, and paramedics ingested him with 500 milligrams of ketamine after a 911 call on a sketchy person in the area. I want to bring in Mari Newman, the attorney for Elijah McClain's father. Mari, thanks so much for being here today. This investigation started in 2020. It's one of the first of its kind in the nation. How is Elijah's father reacting to the findings?
Thanks so much for having me. You know, it's really a bittersweet moment for Elijah's father because, of course, nothing is going to bring back Elijah. On the other hand, the fact that this investigation has revealed very conclusively what those of us who have been doing civil rights work or have walked in the streets while Black or brown know is that there is racially biased excessive force by the Aurora Police Department. So hopefully this report will cause Aurora to change its practices and will serve as a model across Colorado and the country.
Mari, this report keyed in on some really important issues, racially biased policing, using excessive force, failing to record required information when officials interact with the community, and accusing Aurora Fire Rescue of illegally administering ketamine. I mean, these are really big problems, all relating directly to Elijah's death. What was most shocking to you, most upsetting to you and his father about this report?
Well, to be totally candid, there was not one thing in the report that was surprising to us. It's exactly what we've known all along and exactly what we alleged in the lawsuit that I filed a couple of years ago.
So this report also found that between 2015 and 2020, Aurora police used force against people of color almost 2.5 times more than white people based on their relative percentage of the population. I just want to get your reaction to those statistics.
Obviously, those are just appalling statistics. But again, they're exactly what I alleged in the lawsuit. And it doesn't come as a surprise. I've been suing the Aurora Police Department now for about a little over 20 years. And this is the same issue we have seen time and time again, despite Aurora's promises in legally binding settlement agreements and other cases that it's going to make changes. Obviously, they need somebody else to police them because they cannot police themselves.
So let's talk about the recommendations here. Ongoing independent oversight to policies, training, record keeping, and hiring. The law gives the city 60 days to come up with a plan to figure out how to make these changes. What do you think of the recommendations, and what else would you like to see here? As you just said, you've been suing the city for 2 decades now. Is this enough?
Well, the recommendations are going to be fleshed out in the form of a court-monitored consent decree. And so that's the details, I think, are going to be rolled out in the course of the next 60 days. So we'll get to see what those include. But reading this report from the Attorney General's office, they're absolutely on track. And I'm looking forward to seeing the details and even working cooperatively and collaboratively on fleshing out some of those details. I had the great pleasure of actually helping to draft the law that gave the Attorney General the authority to do this. I worked with our Colorado State representatives, particularly Leslie Herod and Serena Gonzalez Gutierrez, on this bill last year, and it is doing exactly what we hoped it would do.
If there was one thing overall that you would say the Aurora Police Department needs to do, what would your recommendation be in conversation with them?
Well, there's an entire culture shift that needs to happen within the Aurora Police Department. And I think that some of the problems are illustrated in this report. It's a department that goes to force way before anything else. So instead of figuring out how to engage in a confrontation with the least amount of force, they use the maximum amount of force that's allowable under the law. That is absolutely improper. De-escalation is critical in appropriate policing. And indeed, there are many kinds of calls where there shouldn't be a police response. Many kinds of 911 calls require something entirely different. If it's, for example, a mental health issue, a drug-related issue, there shouldn't be a police response. And so we'd like to see cultural changes within the Aurora Police Department, more authority for the chief to hire, fire, and discipline appropriately, and changes so that police are not the first responders when they are not the best ones for the circumstance.
Well, let's hope you're able to work together so we can see all of those changes. I know this will not bring Elijah McClain back, but hopefully it will prevent this from happening to another young person. Maury, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
And they're off. SpaceX successfully launching the first all-civilian space crew into orbit last night. Right now, they are hundreds of miles above us, orbiting the Earth on a 3-day mission. NBC News correspondent Kerry Sanders has all the excitement.
Allison, the amazing Inspiration 4 crew includes a billionaire businessman, a geoscientist, PhD, a millennial medical specialist, and an aerospace engineer. 4 ordinary Americans on an extraordinary journey. They're 360 miles above planet Earth, traveling at an astonishing 17,500 miles per hour.
Breathtaking moment. The SpaceX Inspiration 4 mission lighting up the night sky when it blasted off Wednesday in a fiery launch from the Kennedy Space Center, taking off from the same launch pad as NASA's Apollo moon missions and the first and last space shuttle flights.
Officially, the Inspiration 4 crew are now on their way to space.
The first ever all-civilian crew now orbiting the Earth on board the SpaceX Crew Dragon capsule. Commander Jared Isaacman, pilot Cyan Proctor, mission specialist Chris Simbrowski, and medical officer Haley Arsenault, soaring into space and soaking it all in. After a hero's welcome in Cape Canaveral and a whole lot of preparation before their liftoff.
So these are essentially the last steps that they will take on planet Earth for the next 3 days.
As is tradition, signing their names and also making a mark on the world.
Leo has you loud and clear. How me? I have you loud and clear, Leo.
6 months of training.
Training for space has been a lot of studying, but also a lot of really fun adventures.
Coming down to this moment.
Right to the doorstep of an exciting and unexplored frontier. A few have come before and many are about to follow. The door's opening now, and it's pretty incredible.
The 4 private citizens will spend the next 3 days collecting scientific research and enjoying the unforgettable views from this observation dome 363.5 miles away from planet Earth, higher than any other human has been since the end of NASA's Apollo program in 1972. The crew of space tourists sharing what they brought with them, including Haley, a childhood cancer survivor who is now the youngest American to go to space.
So when I'm in space, I'm going to pull this photo out.
A reminder of home to keep them grounded as they navigate among the stars, ushering in a new era of civilian space exploration.
With the arrival of the Inspiration 4 astronauts in space, yet another record is broken. There are now more people in space than ever before, 14 between astronauts from China, astronauts on a coordinated mission by NASA, and the Inspiration 4 crew. So we know space is infinite, but it's getting a little crowded up there.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.